Deliberately, I wanted a variety of different perspectives, but I think that's meant we've had a lot to take in, a lot to assimilate, a lot we'll have to think about in the future and come back to. But there seem to be three themes that came across to me from the morning that I perhaps hadn't expected, or came across much more strongly than I expected. The first was the theme of contradiction. There seems to be a lot of contradictions embodied in this technology, particularly I think the contradiction that Joshua started us off thinking about as to what extent this kind of technology, which on the one hand seems to enhance trust, may actually do away with it, and vice versa. A lot of discussion around the question of scale, looking at both the very local scale and the very global scale in terms of my discussion about the project here within the Eco-Village, but also Gar's presentation from the perspective of global supply chains and the global use of these kinds of technology. And then the third theme seemed to be the importance of face-to-face. Now that probably shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but it's something that's often missing, I think, from the discourse around these blockchain technologies. Then I was trying to think about Paolo's presentation and the different things that he was talking about there, and a couple of things that sort of occurred to me there. The first is, I suppose, just for me as a practical thing, I've been meaning to read more of Polanyi's stuff for quite a long time. I think I need to maybe move it up that very long list of reading that I must do someday. It seems that Polanyi has a lot to teach us, and maybe what we should be thinking about, maybe one of the tasks for now is how to update Polanyi's for the digital age, because I think that the digital technology offers the potential for transformation in a lot of ways. It doesn't, as we've heard, do away with a lot of these old problems, these old human problems, and the need for us to establish good, strong, resilient connections between ourselves. But at the same time, it certainly accelerates the pace at which these things can happen and can bring about huge changes in terms of scale. Related to that, I think there's a lot of discussion there about the real economy and how much of any of these things are actually real. Is the economy itself simply fake to begin with, essentially? And I think we need to think about the connectedness of the digital and the real world. In terms of a lot of my research and teaching, it's really in information technology law. And if that's a sphere that you're at all familiar with, you'll know that we went from a period in the 1990s where we really saw the online world as completely separate. And now we're seeing that it really is very much part of the real world with very real world implications, both on the micro and on the macro scale on a whole different range of levels. And we're only really beginning to grapple with that, I think, now, the fact that this is all just part of the world in which we live. And then finally, it seems to me that we need more alternative perspectives and applications for blockchain if we think they can be developed in useful ways, to think more about how it can be used for sustainability, for example, how it can be used for communities, which is the reason that I wanted today to happen. Paolo talked a lot about mutual credit. Is that a space in which this new technology can enable that at a new scale? And also, I think it's important to acknowledge one particularly important perspective which hasn't been represented today, and that's gender. I think there are a lot of gender issues wrapped up in blockchain that we really didn't get to touch on at all. And there are probably other different issues as well that we could bring in there in terms of the digital divide, for example, and the capacity of developing countries to use this tool. To begin to close then, I think in terms of follow-ups, I'm glad to take on board suggestions that people from the floor have in terms of what we can do to move forward from today. But certainly I've taken the sheets that people wrote on during the idea writing session, which David facilitated earlier, and I will write those up as best I can and may come back to one or two of you for your help with just clarifying what you meant. And I'll circulate those over the coming weeks. And then try to publish them, disseminate them, also engage with the Eco-Village community here and with organizations like Cultivate and FASTA, and see how those ideas can be developed, because a lot of that work will not be done by me, basically. It's going to be down to either people here in this room or people elsewhere to take those ideas forward. But at least we have a list and a menu of ideas that people can pick from. But I suppose related to that, I think it's important that those ideas are owned as well. And perhaps if there's an idea that you worked on as the instigator of, or that you were particularly involved in the discussion of, perhaps you might want to take some sort of responsibility for moving that idea forward into the future, and think about making it concrete. Think about looking for funding for it, or finding partners, or whatever. Also related to that, I think that we've had a good day in terms of discussion and conversation, a lot of talking, a lot of chatting, a lot of the building of networks. I think it's important that we continue to do that. With that in mind particularly, I have here a list of all of the people here today with their email addresses. So if you didn't pick one of those up when you came in, a lot of people didn't get them because I wasn't quite organized enough to have a sort of a little pack for people when they came. This wasn't that kind of conference. But these are here. Please take one if you didn't get one earlier. And try and keep in touch with the people here, because I think, again, with the diversity of disciplines and approaches and perspectives that are here in the room, there is the possibility of building really very useful connections into the future. So finally, to close, I'd like to again thank a number of different organizations and people. The Irish Research Council, obviously, for funding not only today's event, but the whole Clough-Penny project as a whole. Without their very generous support, then none of us would be here today and none of this would be happening. I'd like to thank Joshua for his excellent keynote and for making such a long journey to come here. I hope that you've enjoyed your brief visit to Cloughjordan. I want to thank all the various speakers for their contribution during the day. I want to thank the various organizations that partnered with me in some shape or form in terms of putting this together: Cloughjordan Eco-Village, Cultivate, FASTA, and We Create, in whose building we're located, and also the School of Law in Galway, which is ultimately where I work, in theory at least, on a day-to-day basis. I particularly want to thank Graham and Davy for all of their work, the many emails back and forth, the Skype chats, and the other discussions in terms of putting today together, drawing up the agenda, agreeing method and approach, and so on. We had, I think, a good and constructive and fun relationship, and I think that the day really went well, mostly because of their expertise and guidance. They know this space an awful lot better than I do, particularly Graham. As I said at the outset of my presentation, I came into this to learn, and I've learned an awful lot. So thank you very much to them. Thank you very much to all of you as well for coming along, for participating, for engaging in the discussion sessions in the afternoon particularly. I hope you've enjoyed the day. I hope you take away some new ideas and perhaps some new friendships as well. And I hope to see you all again, either here in the Eco-Village. Maybe we'll have the next seminar in the amphitheatre that Davy showed us, or maybe in Galway or at some other event. One final practical note just before I close. Your name badge, you might just drop it into the box that's on the table over there, so that can be recycled with an eye to sustainability into the future. I know it's a small thing, but I would prefer to see them be pressed into service at some future event again in the future. So again, thank you very much, and I hope you had a good day. Thank you.